ॐ दक्षिणस्य समारम्भा शङ्कराचार्यमध्यमा अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्ता स्मर्या गुरुपरम्परा श्रुतिस्मृतिपुराणानाम् आलयं करुणालयं नमामि भगवत्पादं शङ्करं लोकशङ्करं शङ्करं शङ्कराचार्यं केशवं बादरायणं सूत्रभाष्यकृतौ वन्दे भगवन्तौ पुनः पुनः ईश्वरो गुरुरात्मेति मूर्तिभेदविभागिने व्योमवद्व्याप्तदेहाय दक्षिणामूर्तये नमः। परिज्ञानाश्रम श्रीगुरुशङ्कर परिज्ञानाश्रम शङ्कर सद्गुरु केशव वामन कृष्णपाण्डुरङ्ग आनन्द परिज्ञान गुरु सद्यो जात शङ्कर सद्गुरु गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णु गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरुः साक्षात् परब्रह्म तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। ॐ सहनाववतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यङ्करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। ॐ नमो भगवते वैवस्वताय मृत्यवे ब्रह्मविद्याचार्याय नचिकेतसे च। So now we are almost in the last verse of the second Valli of the first chapter. As I told you in the initial introductory verses itself, that Kathopanishad has two chapters, two adhyayas, and in each adhyaya there are three vallis or three sections. So we are almost coming to the end of the second valli now. The first valli saw the story where Nachiketa, the Shishya, and Yamadharmaraja, the Acharya, were introduced to each other. And then what happens between them, and how Nachiketa is actually a Shishya who is fit for this knowledge, who is fit for Atmajnanam. That was what was talked about in the very first Valli of the first verse, first Adhyaya, and also what is it that is required for a teacher, and how a teacher or how an Acharya has to see whether the Shishya is capable of getting this knowledge, and how Nachiketa, as an 8 or 9-year-old boy who very successfully passes the test and proves to the Acharya that he is actually fit enough to get this knowledge, fit enough to understand this very, very subtle knowledge called as Brahma Vidya or Atma Vidya. Then we saw in the second Valli, the introductory verses in the second Valli talked about the very, Swarupam, or what is it that takes for a Shishya to be a Shishya of Brahmagyana, and what are the features, or what is the nature of the Acharya. That was what was talked about. And here Nachiketa reiterated his third boon request. He had requested for you remember that Yamadharmaraja had given him three boons, and in the very first Valli itself, Nachiketa asked in the third boon that he wanted this knowledge of Atma. But then, because Yamadharmaraja was not sure whether Nachiketa is fit for this knowledge or not, he tried in many ways to, kind of take Nachiketa's mind away by luring him with all kinds of things and making him, try to choose between the Preyas and Shreyas. But Nachiketa, having made up his mind that he was not interested in Preyas but interested absolutely in Shreyas. Preyas means what? Material benefits, material growth, material wealth, the pursuits which a person goes after for material benefits and material wealth in life. That pursuit is called as Preyas. And I already told you that Preyas involves Dharma, Artha, Kama, Purusharthas. Shreyas is that Purushartha or that choice of the Jiva where he wants to be free from this samsara. He wants to actually have the ultimate immortality, the freedom, and the abhayam that this Atmajnanam can give. And Atmajnanam is nothing but knowing the very nature of oneself, the very nature of the Jagat, the very nature of Ishvara. This is what is called as Atma Jnanam. And ultimately, Atma Jnanam says, Brahma Satyam, Jagan Mithya, Jivo Brahmaiva Naparaha. And all the Upanishads, in their own way, with their own different flavors, they talk about the same thing. And here, Acharya Yamadharmaraja started teaching Nachiketa from the 18th verse of the second Valli, the actual teaching of Brahmajnana. And I also reminded you that these verses from the 18th verse of the second Valli up till the end of this chapter, these verses are talking about the very Swarupam of Atma or Brahman. And these are the same verses which have been taken up by Lord Krishna in the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita to describe the verses between the 11th verse and the 25th verse, whatever Bhagwan Krishna has described as Atma Swarupam or Brahma Swarupam is nothing but these verses which are being talked about here. Some of the verses like Najayate Mriyate Va Kadachit, which was there in Bhagavad Gita, it's the same verse that has been lifted from Kathopanishad with just one word difference, vipaschit. That's all. All these I described to you. And what happened right from the 18th verse? The first thing that the 18th verse talked about, just a small summary of the last session. The first, that is the 18th verse, talked about Atma or Brahman being Ajaha, Nityaha, Shashvataha, and Puranaha. That means Atma or Brahman. We have to understand here very clearly. I have been telling this from Bhagavad Gita days. Atma and Brahman mean one and the same. So when we say Atma, Brahman, Ishvara, all these are Paryaya Padas. That means these are all the synonyms for the same consciousness. From the point of view of the individual, we call it as Atma. From the point of view of the Samashti or the total, we call it as Brahman. But it is the very same consciousness which is behind each individual Jiva. At the same time, it is the very same consciousness which is the Adhishtanam of the entire universe outside. So the 18th verse talked about Atma being unborn, Ajaha. Atma being Nityam, that is Atma being eternal. Atma being Nirvikari. Atma does not undergo any changes. It talked about Atma being that Nirvikari or unchanging consciousness. Shashvataha, that which is eternal, that which does not undergo any kind of vikaras, Nirvikari. Puranaha, that which never grows, that which never has any vriddhi, that which never has any kshaya. So the 18th verse talked about Nityatvam, Shashvatatvam, and also talked about the eternity of Atma, the Nityatvam of Atma, and Nirvikaritvam of Atma, where no vikaras are taking place. Then the 19th verse talked about Akartritvam, Abhoktritvam of Atma. Atma is Akarta, Abhokta, that was what was talked about. In the 20th verse, Anoraniya Mahato Mahiyan, Atma was described as the Sarva Adhishtana Swarupam. It is the adhishtanam of everything. Sarva adhishtana swarupam. It was talked about as adhishtanam of the smallest of the small. Adhishtanam means what? The very content, the very support of the smallest of the small things in this universe. And whatever is the biggest of the big one can imagine, of every one of these things, Atma or consciousness, Satrupena, Chitrupena, that is by providing the easiness, the existence and consciousness, it is the very adhishtanam, it is the very base, it is the very support, it is the very content, it is the very stuff with which the entire universe is made. That was what was talked about in the 21st verse, Anoraniyan Mahato Mahiyan. Then in the 22nd verse, Bhagwan Yamadharmaraja talked about Ashariram Sharireshu. This Atma is Ashariram. This Atma does not have a name. It does not have a form. It does not embody itself. It does not have a physical body, a physical form. But it is present It is available in this constantly changing Sharira. Ashariram Sharireshu Anavasteshu Avastitam. Anavasteshu Sharireshu Avastitam Atma. Anavasteshu means ever changing. There is no system. This body, the bodies of the jivas, which are constantly changing, in this constantly changing upadhis of the bodies of the jivas, is nothing but this Atma. Anavasteshu avasthitam. This Atma is the very content of the ever changing bodies of all the jivas. And he said, Mahantam vibhum atmanam matva dhiro na shochati. Dhira, a jnani, a person, a wise person who knows this, understands very clearly that I am not this changing Sharira, but I am this changeless Atma, which is posited, which is there in this body mind sense complex, incidentally available in this body mind sense complex, which is the only adhishtanam of this body mind sense complex. This ever changing body mind sense complex is an incidental accompaniment of me, the Atma. This, whoever understands, this, whoever clearly understands, is the Mahatmanam Vibhum Atmanam Vatva. Mahantam, this great Vibhum, the one which manifests as the whole universe. Atmanam Matva, having understood, Dhiraha na shochati. He no longer comes back into this samsara of moha, shoka, shoka, raga, moha, shoka, dukhi, dukha rupi, raga, shoka, moha rupi samsara. This person never comes back again. And in the 23rd and 24th verses, Yamadharmaraja took a little deviation from the nature of Atma and said in the 23rd verse that Mumukshutvam is the most important quality that is required for a Mumukshu to know this, to understand this Atma. So the importance of Mumukshutvam was talked about in the 23rd verse. In the 24th verse, Shama Dama, the disciplines that are necessary to keep a person mind and sense organs in a disciplined manner, that was talked about. So the 23rd and the 24th verses talked about some of the sadhanas that are necessary for a person to really understand this knowledge, to be a patra for this knowledge. And he said Tivra Mumukshutvam is the most important one. Out of the four, Sadhana Chatushtaya Sampatti. What is Sadhana Chatushtaya Sampatti? Viveka, Vairagya, Shamadhi Shatka Sampatti, and Mumukshutvam. Out of these four, here Yamadharma Raja says Mumukshutvam is the most important quality. Unless I am interested in this knowledge, unless I am seriously committed to this knowledge is not going to make any sense to me. This is what Bhagwan Shankaracharya talked about in Vivek Chudamani also. He said, Mumukshutvam is the first and the most important requirement for a person to understand this knowledge. Then he said Vairagyam. He went to Vairagyam next and said Mumukshutvam and Vairagyam, they only try to improve upon each other. They support each other. The more Vairagya one develops, the more Mumukshutvam one develops. The more one is a Mumukshu, the more the Vairagya for the outer world of objects. This is what here Yamadharmaraja is also telling the same thing here, Mumukshutvam, and in the 24th verse, he talked about sadhana chatushtaya sampatti in the form of shama dhamma. Shama means what? Mano nigraha. Dhamma means what? Indriya nigraha. Now in the next verse, in the 25th verse of this Valli, the last verse of this Valli, again Bhagwan Yamadharmaraja comes to the Swarupam of Atma, where he says Atma or Brahman is the resolution ground of this entire universe. That means what? This entire universe ultimately resolves into this consciousness. That is why there is an Upanishad called Mandukya Upanishad, where it is the Upanishad explains this Atma as Prapanchopashamam. Prapanchopashamam means what? This is the resolution ground. This is where the entire universe arises, exists, and also ultimately resolves. So, this Atma, this consciousness, as the resolution ground of the entire universe, is that which is going to be told in the last verse of this chapter, verse number, not chapter, if this Valli, the verse number 25. Let's see this one. यस्य ब्रह्म च क्षत्रं च उभे भवत ओदनः मृत्युर्यस्योपसेचनं क इत्था वेद यत्र सः. Okay, so he says here, yasya, for whom, for which Atma, Brahma cha kshatran cha ubhe bhavata odanaha. Odanaha means food. We consume food, isn't it? The jivas consume food. So here, a kind of an analogy is given. Metaphorically, this verse is described as the Atma or Brahman literally gulping the entire universe, swallowing the entire universe. And how does he explain that? Yasya, for this Atma, Brahma cha kshatrancha. Brahmacha Kshatrancha means where the Brahmanas and Kshatriyas both are like Odanam, like Annam, where it can be so like Annam is swallowed, Annam is consumed. So this Atma for whom Brahma cha Kshatrancha. Here Brahma means the Brahmanas and Kshatriyas. Now you may ask, what about others? Are only Brahmanas and Kshatriyas swallowed by Brahman? No. What he says is Brahmacha Kshatrancha here is an Upalakshanam. It is an example for all the Jivas. This is the way the Upanishad describes it. That's all. There are different ways in which the Upanishad describes different things. So instead of saying the whole Jagat or instead of saying the whole universe, he says, Yamadharmaraja says, Yasya, for whom, for each, which Atma, Brahma cha kshatrancha ubhe bhavata odanaha. For this Atma, for whom the Brahmanas and Kshatriyas become as though food to be consumed. And by Brahmana and Kshatriya, the whole universe is talked about. Two important Varnas are being talked about here. It does not mean that only these two are being swallowed. Swallowed in the sense what? Where the Atma is that where the entire universe resolves ultimately. That is what is talked about here. So, yasya brahmacha kshatracha ube bhavata odanaha. This entire universe, this entire jagat, represented by the Brahmanas and Kshatriyas and all the other Varnas and all the other Jivas and all the other non living things, this whole universe is expressed by these two words Brahmacha, Kshatrancha. That means what? For whom? For which Atma? This entire universe is like Odanam. Odanam means like Annam. Odanam is the meaning of Annam, like something to be consumed, something to be swallowed. And he says, Mrityuryasya upasechanam. I, the Mrityu, is like, a side dish. Upasechanam means a side dish. The whole universe for this Atma is like the main dish, the rice, the main course, the rice. And for whom Mrityu, say Mrityu means what? Mrityu Devata and all the others, everything else. Mrityu here represents what? Time. Mrityu here means time. Time and space for whom, when the whole world is resolved, the time and space are also resolved. We have already seen that there was no time before the universe was created. The entire universe is a projection in time and space. So Mrityuhu means here, it does not mean he, Yamadharmaraja. He says for whom Mrityuhu. Mrityu means for whom time itself, the very time and space principle itself is like a side dish. That means what? It is this Atma in which ultimately the entire universe, along with time and space, gets resolved. It is this Atma in which space and time appear. Along with it, the whole Jagat is projected by Maya on this Brahman. At the same time, at the time of Pralaya, at the time of resolution of this entire universe, what happens is this entire universe, along with space and time, along with the time principle, is completely withdrawn or resolved into this Atma. So he says that Mrityuhu Yasya Upasechanam. For whom time or Kala is the side dish. That means what? This entire universe is like Odanam or Annam or the main dish. It is just an example, just a metaphorical explanation. We should not take it literally. We should understand, the figure of speech which is involved behind it. So here, Yasya Brahma cha Kshatrancha, the entire universe, Ubhe, both of them means the entire universe, Bhavata Odanaha, who become the literally the annam for this Atma, Mrityuhu Yasya Upasechanam, Mrityu or the Kala or the time principle for whom becomes like a side dish, Ka Itha Veda Yatra Saha. And who can know this Brahman in this way? Itha, Kaha, who, Itha, Veda, Yatra, Saha. Who can know this? In this way, who can know this unless one is taught? Who can know this means what? Only a jnani will know this. A jnani will know that ultimately the entire universe, which involves this body, mind, sense complex also, everything that is involved in the Jagat, in the projected Jagat, ultimately, along with time and space, is nothing but resolved or absorbed in this very Atma Swarupa. Kaha, who, Itha, Veda Yatra Saha. In this way, who can know this Atma? Who can know this Atma unless a person is an adhikari to know this Atma? How else will any other person know this Atma to be the one in which the entire Jagat is projected, in which the entire Jagat is sustained, and in which the entire Jagat, along with the time and space principle, is completely resolved? Who else can understand this unless a person is prepared for this knowledge? Sadhana Chatushtaya Sampanna Mumukshu Adhikari is the one who can understand this. Otherwise, if we simply say that the entire Jagat is Odanam for this Atma, who can understand this? Nobody can understand it. That's what he's saying. Who can understand? That is only a person like you, Hey Nachiketa, who has the sadhana chatushtaya sampatti, who has got the tivra mumukshutvam to know this, and a person who has got a guru who can unfold the words of the Shastra. See, now if you look at this verse, what sense does it make to us unless it is explained properly? This verse is so cryptic. It is so cryptic that unless a guru who has understood or learnt this sampradayataya, how can anyone understand it? That's what he's saying here. That to understand what this Atman is, one thing is the person has to be a prepared adhikari for that. Secondly, he should surrender to the Shastra. He should surrender to the Guru. It is only this is the knowledge which can only be taught by a guru to the shishya in the traditional way, in the sampradayika way, in which the guru has learnt also from his guru. And so he says, Ka itha veda yatrasa. So, with this, the second Valli of chapter 1 is also over. Now, we are coming to the third Valli. Now, what is this third Valli talking about? The first Valli talked about the introduction, bringing the Shisha and Guru together. I already told you. The second Valli, the teaching actually started after Nachiketa insisted on actually getting his third boon realized in the way of saying that I do not want anything else except this knowledge. And he asked also, Anyatra Adharmat, in the 14th verse, our Nachiketa asked, I want to know that Atma. I'm not interested in knowing this traveling Jiva. who travels from one body to the other at the time of the death, comes back again and again, who, is a patra for all the rituals and all the karmas and upasanas, and starts jumping from one branch of the tree of samsara to other. He starts. I'm not interested in knowing that kind of a jiva. I'm interested and I seriously want, not simply an interest, I'm committed to knowing about that Atma which is Anyatra Dharmat, Anyatra Dharmat, that which is beyond Papa Punya, Anyatra Asmat Krita Akritacha, that which is neither the cause nor the effect, that which is cause beyond cause and effect. So that Atma, I want to know. Anyata Bhutacha Bhavyacha, that which is unlimited by time, that which is unlimited by Karana Karya, that which is not affected by Papa Punya, that Asanga Atma I am interested in knowing. And then the teaching started in the 18th verse, went up till the 25th verse, and the second Valli is over. Now, in the third Valli, we are going to the third Valli now. What are we going to see in the third Valli? The third Valli again, the same Atma Jnanam continues. The Brahma Jnanam continues. And when Brahma Jnanam continues, again there are certain sadhanas involved which are going to be talked about, especially in the form of fine tuning the instrument of one's body, mind, sense complex. That's going to be talked about. And Jnana Phalam is going to be talked about. So, Jnanam, Jnana Sadhanas, and Jnana Phalam are going to be talked about in the third Valli. And before we go to the first verse, I'll read the first verse. Before we start the first verse, actually, I would like to give you a brief idea of what the first verse and the second verse are talking about. The first two verses are the introductory verses to this Valli, the first verse and the second verses. And what do these two introductory verses introduce? That is what we have to understand. So, first, I will read the first verse, and then before we go to the explanation of the first verse, I'll give you a brief idea about what is it that Yamadharmaraja wants to talk about here. So, now here he says, Ritam pibantau sukritasya loke guham pravishtau parame pararthe छायातपौ ब्रह्मविदो वदन्ति पञ्चाग्नयो ये च त्रिनाचिकेताः. So now, before we go to the verse as such, let us see one thing. Now, in the last Valli, from the 18th verse up till the 25th verse, Bhagwan Yamadharmaraja taught Nachiketa about this Atma or Brahman, and Atma Brahma Swarupas were being talked about. By now we know that there is something called as a Jiva. This Jiva is the one which is traveling. The Jiva is there in every Jiva. There is, a conscious being, an individual being called as the Jiva. At the time of the death of the Sthula Shariram, of this physical body, this Jiva leaves the physical body, travels, and goes to various lokas depending upon what punyas, papas this Jiva has accrued in his previous, janma, previous embodiments, and ultimately based on a set of the sanchita karmas which are fructifying as prarabdha karmas, this jiva is going to be embodied again in some other's place at some other time to work out a part of the sanchita karma called as the prarabdha. We know that. So it looks as if there are two things. One is this atma, which is constant, which is permanent, which is nityam, shashvatam, puranaha, that which does not travel, that which is there all the time. And then we have one more thing, that is that jiva, which is an individual ahankara, an individual feeling that, I am an individual jiva. All of us feel that, correct? I am an individual. You feel you are an individual, a way other than the other individual. So there is something called as a jiva also, which is constantly traveling. If Atma is anyatra dharmat, anyatra adharmat, that means if Atma is the one which does not accrue any punya and papa, jiva is the one which accrues papa and punya. Atma does not travel, whereas Jiva travels. We can say Paramatma and Jivatma. We can say that Paramatma and Jivatma or Atma and Jiva. The Jiva travels. It accrues Papa and Punya. The Jiva has cause and effect, whereas Atma anyatra asmat krita akritacha. That means Atma is beyond cause and effect that we have seen. Whereas what about this, Jiva? It is affected by the cause and effect. Karma becomes the cause, karma phala becomes the effect. Then karma phala becomes the cause, the next karma becomes the effect. So this way, this Jiva is exactly opposite to that of Atma. Now, where did this Jiva come from? Where this Jiva came from? What is this Atman, which is Ajaha, Nityaha, Shashvataha, Puranaha? And what is this Jivatma or Jiva, which is an individual, which is traveling from body to body, carrying karma phalas, accruing karma phalas, and becoming a karta bhokta. Atma is a karta bhokta, Jiva is the karta bhokta. Atma does not accrue any punya papa, Jiva accrues punya papa. Atma does not travel, the Jiva travels. Now, from where this Jiva has come? Where this traveling Jiva has come? And our Nachiketa has made it very clear that he is not interested in knowing about this Jiva. He is only interested in knowing about this untraveling Ajaha, Nityaha, Akarta, Abhokta, Atma. He is interested in, and that is what Yamadharmaraja gave him the description of the Swarupam of this Atma from the 18th verse up till the 25th verse of the previous Valli, of the second Valli. Now, what is this Jiva? Where has it come from? Now, Jiva has not come from anywhere. What is this Jiva? We'll see. We have already seen that in the 13th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, where Chidabhasa was being talked about. There are some questions I get, some people ask about Jiva. Those people who have asked me about this question, who is a traveling Jiva? Does the Jiva carry the Sanchita karmas with him? What is this traveling Jiva? Those people who have asked me this question, they'll know. Then you can listen to me carefully now. All your doubts will be sorted out. Now, what is this Jiva? Now, Atma is all pervasive. We have already seen that. Atma is present everywhere. This Atma is also present in every Jiva also. So the Atma as the light of consciousness is present in every Jiva also. Now what happens? In every Jiva, in every living organism, let me not confuse you with the Jiva, in every living, organism, it may be a human, it may be an animal, it may be a plant, any living organism contains a Sukshma Sharira. And a very important part of Sukshma Sharira is the Buddhi or the mind. You can take the mind and Buddhi together, Antakarana or the Buddhi. This is considered to be the most subtle and the most sensitive of the matter principle. It is said in our scriptures that mind is also matter principle. Many people say mind is nothing but the flow of thoughts. That is not true. Mind is a subtle principle. It is a subtle matter principle in which the thoughts arise. Mind is a dravya. Mind is the matter principle, which is made up of what? Tattvabodha, apanchikrita pancha mahabhutas. Apanchikrita, where the grossification of Panchamahabhutas have not taken place, ungrossified Panchamahabhutas, the subtle aspects, the sattva aspect of all the Panchamahabhutas together forms this Antakaranam or the mind buddhi. They are all Antakaranam. And it is considered to be the most subtle part, the subtlest of the human or any other any other living beings body mind sense complex. And what happens is wherever there is this consciousness, this mind reflects that consciousness. This mind is a perfect reflecting medium. This mind, which is nothing but a part of the Sukshma Sharira, which is nothing but apanchikrita pancha mahabhutas, this is the most sensitive and the subtle place where Atma gets reflected like a mirror. Atma cannot reflect itself in the body because it is gross, it is not possible. We have seen also that there are so many things in the universe. In a mirror, something can get reflected very well. In a very shiny surface, something can get reflected. But on the floor, on the walls, I can't reflect my face. My face can get reflected in a mirror. My face can get reflected in a very, very shining thali or something like that. It's possible. We have seen that. Therefore, wherever there is a reflecting medium, a reflection is formed. Similarly, the Atma is all pervasive. It is present everywhere. It is present in all the living beings, in all the non living beings, non living things also. But in the living beings, this Sukshma Sharira has the subtlest part called as the Buddhi, which is the subtlest matter principle, which is an excellent and a perfect reflecting medium. So, what happens? Wherever there is a mind, wherever there is a Buddhi, this Atma gets reflected and forms a reflection. Now, this reflection of Atma is called as Chidabhasa. We saw that Abhasa Chaitanyam. We saw what does Krishna say in the 13th chapter? He says, starting from the Jagat until the Abhasa Chaitanyam, everything is Mithya. So he said Jiva is also Mithya because Abhasa Chaitanyam is Mithya. If you remember what we have seen in the 13th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, long, long, long ago, but you'll have to remember this. So, what is said here is there is this Atma, the light of consciousness, which is all pervading. Wherever there is a living being with a Sukshma Sharira, with the Buddhi, which forms a perfect reflecting surface, a reflection of this Atma is formed. So, it is as though there are two things. There are really no two things. There is only the Atma and a reflection of Atma in every living being. How many reflections are there? As many Sukshma Shariras are there. As many living beings are there, so many reflections are there. How many are the original consciousness? One. There is one original consciousness. Millions and millions of reflections are there because as many reflecting media are there in the form of the individual, organism, individual living being, that many reflections are formed. Now, this reflected consciousness, the original consciousness is only one and the only. And what is there is only this consciousness. There are no two consciousnesses. There is no original and no reflected. There is only one consciousness. But then, when this consciousness gets reflected in the buddhi of every living organism, this reflection is called as Pratibimba Chaitanyam or Abhasa Chaitanyam or Chidabhasa. Now, where is this Chidabhasa? In the reflecting medium. Let's take the example of you standing in front of a mirror. You are the original. Supposing there are five mirrors in front of you, five reflections are formed. How many are there? There are no six things. There is only one thing, your face. The other five are reflections. And where are they? In the reflecting surface. In the mirror, in the reflecting surface, there is a reflection. Similarly, in the reflecting surface called as the mind or the buddhi, there is a reflection of this Atma Chaitanyam, the light of consciousness, which is called as the Chidabhasa. Now, the reflecting surface buddhi and the Chidabhasa, along with the entire Sukshma Sharira and Sthula Sharira, this particular package is called as the Jiva. It's called as the Jivatma. And that original consciousness or that consciousness, one and the only consciousness, remains like that. So, the reflected consciousness or the Abhasa Chaitanyam, along with the reflecting medium called as the Buddhi and Sukshma Sharira and the Sthula Sharira, forms as though a different independent unit called as the Jiva. It is not an independent unit, but I think that I am an independent Jiva, a unit by myself. But a reflection cannot exist without the original. You can see that, isn't it? When the mirror moves, the reflection moves. I need not move. I'm standing like this. When the mirror moves, the reflection moves. Similarly, we saw that, asinam duram vrajati. We saw that in the 20th verse, I think. Yes, 20th or 21st verse. Just in the previous chapter, we saw that. That is, what does it mean? It is this reflected consciousness, this abhasa chaitanya, which moves, which travels from place to place. This abhasa chaitanya, this reflected consciousness, along with the sukshma sharira and sthula sharira, is called as jiva or jivatma. So there is this atma consciousness, we can call it paramatma or atma, and this is the jiva. What is a jiva? A reflection of atma along with the body mind sense complex is called as the jiva. If Atma is Nityam, Jiva is Anityam. Atma does not come and go, Jiva comes and goes. Atma does not travel, Jiva travels. Atma is not a karta, Jiva is a karta. Atma is not a bhokta, Jiva is a bhokta. Atma does not accrue any punyas papas, Jiva accrues punya papas. Atma is not born again and again, the jiva embodies itself into different bodies again and again. So this is what is called as the jiva or the jivatma. Therefore, it looks as though there are two things, but they are not two things. One is the original, one is the reflection. What is common between them? The sentience or the consciousness, light of consciousness is common between them. This is reflected light, that is the original light of consciousness. But otherwise, they are exactly opposite to each other. And where are they both available? Both of them are available in this Hridaya Guha. So now, in this chapter, Bhagwan Yamadharmaraja, the Acharya, wants to talk about the journey of the Jivatma and contrast it with non-traveling Jiva or Atma. Because we know that there is something which travels, there is something which is there even after the body dies. There are two things. The Jiva, the traveling Jiva is left behind. The Sukshma Sharira and the Chidabhasa are left behind with all the karmas, Sanchita Karma Phala. Then Atma is there, which is left behind, means which is the only thing there. So, who am I? I am a combination of Atma and Jiva, isn't it? But what is my real nature? Atman, this consciousness, is my real nature. Then what is this Jiva? I, the Jiva, is only an incidental nature, and I have to understand that this Jiva is not the original. This Jiva is nothing but a reflection of I, the Atma. I am not this Jiva, I am that Sakshi Chaitanya Nitya Atma Swarupa. So, this is what he wants to talk about here in the first and the second verse, introducing Jivatma. What is this traveling Jivatma? He wants to introduce here. And then he wants to say what is the ultimate goal of this Jivatma. The ultimate goal of this Jivatma is what? To understand that I am not, I, the Jiva, the Jivatvam is Mithya. I, the Jiva, am Mithya. I am not the original. I, the real me, is nothing but this Atma Swarupa. This is what is called as Atma Jnanam. Understanding that I am not the Jiva Swarupa, incidentally I have a Jiva Swarupa, actually I am the Atma Swarupa. It looks as though there are two things, as though there is an original, the Atma Swarupa, and a traveling Jiva. Who am I out of these two? Right now it looks as if I am a combination of both of them. Who am I out of these two? I am not the traveling Jiva. I am not the Papa Punya accruing Jiva. I am not the cause effect producing Jiva. Then who am I? I am the very original light of consciousness whose reflection I think I am real. It's like a reflection in the mirror, thinking that that is the reality and forgetting the original face, how it really. That's what we are all thinking now. It is like the reflection in the mirror who thinks that that is the original, nothing else is there. But I, the original, am very much there behind. I, the consciousness, light of consciousness, Atman, is that original, the only thing that I am there, the only thing that is there. The Jiva, I, is a mere reflection, and I, the Jiva, am not the reality. Then who am I? I am that Atma Chaitanya, the so called original consciousness. But we are a little skeptical to use the words original consciousness and reflected consciousness because there are no two things, two consciousnesses, there is only one consciousness. The reflection is not counted. When you see a reflection in the mirror, you don't count it as two, you count only one. I am here, the other one is a reflection. The reflection is not counted. Similarly, here, the Atma Swarupa, the light of consciousness, is one and the only. Ajaha Nityaha Shashvatah Puranaha. But there is a traveling Jiva who's nothing but a reflection of this consciousness, what is called as the Abhasa Chaitanya or Chidabhasa. And then how are they? Where are they two available? Where is this Jiva Chaitanya available? Where is Atma Chaitanya? Both are available within me. The Jiva also is here in my Hridaya Guha. Atma, this consciousness, also is there in this Hridaya Guha. That is what here in the first verse, as an introduction to what is a Jiva, what is the Jivatma, that is going to be explained by Acharya Yamadharmaraja in the first verse of the third Valli. So let us, I have already read this. So here he says, Ritam pibantau sukritasya loke. Loke, in the human body, in the body of the jiva, in the body of a plant, in the body of an animal, any, whatever is a living organism, loke means in the body, in a living body. Here, loka does not mean Brahma Loka or Swarga Loka or Bhuloka. No. Loka here means the physical body of a living organism. Rutam pibantau sukritasya. This Jivatma, this Jiva, this reflected consciousness, who has traveled and accrued many bodies, embodiments, done lot of karma and accrued lot of karma phala, sukritasya rutam pibantau. The one who is going through the bhoga of all the karma phalas of what all karmas he has done. Ritam means what? Karma phalam. That which is definitely to come. Ritam. Pibantau. Pibantau means the one who is drinking or the one who is experiencing. The one who's actually the bhokta. The one who's the experiencer of all the karma phalas. Sukritasya. That means what? Done by oneself. The jiva does the karmas. Who does the karmas? Not the Atma. We have already seen Atma is a karta. Then who's the one who's doing the karmas? It is the Chidabhasa. That is the Abhasa Chaitanya along with the rest of the Sukshma Sharira and Stula Sharira. This complex Chidabhasa, Sukshma Sharira, Stula Sharira complex is called as the Jiva. And this Jiva does all the karma and accrues all the karma phalas. These karma phalas are called as Ritam. That means what? In this body, in this living body, let us now take humans only, let us not worry, but it is to do with all the bodies, all the living bodies. They may not, the Sukshma Sharira may not be well manifesting in certain jivas like in the plants and things. We may not be able to see the sukshma sharira so clearly, but then every living organism has a stula sharira, has a sukshma sharira, has a karana sharira, and there is this chidabhasa in every jiva, however small it may be, however insignificant may be. Now, for our study, we'll take the human body, human jiva. So, rutam pibantau sukritasya loke. In this body, there is a Jivatma, which is a reflection of the main, which is a reflection of Atma, and the one who has done a lot of karma in all its previous incarnations or in all its previous embodiments, and who is experiencing the karma phala of all the karmas done. Ritam pibanto sukritasya loke Guham pravishtav parame parardhe. Hridaya Guham, in the mind. Our scriptures say that the Antakarana or the mind is within the Hridaya Guha, within this space of the heart. Guham Pravishtav Parame Paradhe. In this Hridaya Guha, there are two things. What are those two things? One is the original consciousness, which is present everywhere, which is also present in the Hridaya Guha. At the same time, in the same Hridaya Guha, in the mind, there is a reflection of this consciousness also. So the Jivatma also is there. Therefore, what? In this Hridaya Guha, the Paramatma also is there, and the reflection called as the Jivatma is also there. Guham, Hridaya Guham, Pravishto. The two are present. Pravishto means entering, but it's as though they are present there. Pravishto, Dvivachanam is here. That means what? There are two things available within the very, Hridaya Akasha. In the very Hridaya Guha, there are as though two things available. What are they? That consciousness which is Ajaha, Nityaha, Shashvataha, Puranaha, what we call as the original or that light of consciousness. And in this Hridaya Guha of every Jiva, there is a reflection also. Because it is in this Hridaya Guha that there is the reflecting medium called as the mind. So, in this reflecting medium, there is the reflection of this original consciousness. Therefore, Guham Pravishto Parame Parardhe. In the Parame Vyoman, in this auspicious and sacred space of the heart, both of them are present. The original, that is the consciousness, Atma, is also present. The reflection of this Atma is also present. But how are they? Chaya tapau Brahma Vido Vadanti. The Brahma Vidas, or people who understand this knowledge, understand that they are as different as Chaya and Atapa. Chaya Tapo. Chaya means shade, Atapa means light. The two, that is the Jivatma and the Paramatma, are both available in the Hridaya Guha of every living being. And what is the Atma doing? Sakshi. It is not doing anything. It is merely observing, doing nothing. What is the Jivatma doing? The Jivatma is doing all the karmas as a karta and experiencing everything as a bhokta. Here also we'll see later in the samsara tree of life, there are two, in the tree of life or tree of samsara, there are two birds. We see that in Mundakopanishad also. One bird is jumping around here and there, doing karma, going through the karma phala, whereas one more bird is there, which is simply sitting there and watching this other bird jumping up and down. Same thing is being talked about here. Similar verse will come later also about the two birds, which will come later in the tree of life. So here he says, Rutam pibantau sukritasya loke guham pravishtav parame parade Chayatapau Brahmavido Vadanti. The knowers of Brahman, the knowers of this knowledge understand that they are exactly opposite to each other. Atma is Nityam, Jiva is Anityam. Atma is not coming and growing, not traveling. It is Sarvagatam, so not traveling. Whereas Jivatma is traveling from one place to other. Why? Because Jivatma is limited in time and space, therefore it travels. Paramatma is unlimited by time and space. It is all pervasive. Therefore, this Paramatma does not travel. Whereas time limited, space limited Jiva travels everywhere. Atma is akarta, Jiva is karta. Atma is abhokta, Jiva is bhokta. Atma does not get affected by punya papa, it is asanga, whereas Jiva is sanga. Sanga means what? It gets involved with kartritvam and bhoktritvam and goes through all the effects of kartritvam and bhoktritvam. Therefore, these two, the reflection of the consciousness, Abhasa Chaitanyam, and Atma, the light of consciousness, though Both of them are available in the same Hridaya Guha, in every living being. They're exactly opposite to each other. Original or actual, the Atma or the original consciousness. Again, excuse me for saying original. It's only to explain I am doing that. Please don't be under the impression that there are two consciousnesses. No, there are no two. There is only one consciousness. But the buddhi reflects this consciousness, and the reflection takes itself to be a real individual and calls itself a jiva. This is what is the jiva. And the jiva carries with it all the sanchita karmas at the time of departure from the body. And the same jiva with a set of prarabdha karma comes back again in another body. Like this anadi, till I understand aham brahmasmi, this jiva keeps coming, going. So, chaya tapo brahmavido vadanti panchagnayo yecha trinachi keta. So those who are also the karma kandis, panchagnayoho means what? Those who are karma kandis, or those who have done this nachiketa agni, they also know. Now, what is the meaning of that? Now there is a traveling jiva. This jiva can have its journey. The jiva is one who can choose its goals. Whether I want that to know and understand, I am that consciousness, original consciousness, which is called as Atma Vidya, Moksha. Whether I want Moksha Purushartha or whether I want material Purushartha like Dharma, Artha, Kama. This traveling jiva itself can decide. The Purusharthas are available for this jiva. Therefore, he says, Panchagnayoho yacha yecha trinachiketa. Those who are karma kandis, those who have done this nachiketa ritual, or those who are doing all the rituals prescribed by Veda Purva, they also know it, that there is a jiva who can choose the destination of various worlds and then decide to go after karma kanda and keep on moving from body to body, accruing punya and going to higher lokas. At the same time, the Brahma Vidas also say that there is an option for this jiva to choose what? To choose nothing but moksha and understand myself to be nothing but that original consciousness. I, the jiva, can choose to go after Veda Purva and do various yagas and yajnas and go to different worlds and accrue material benefits. That's one choice I have got as a jiva. Another choice that I is no, I want to be a mumukshu. I want to know what I am, and by knowing I am nothing but that original consciousness, then I have attained my ultimate goal of immortality or freedom from samsara. Now, what I want to do, it depends upon this. This jiva has a choice. This jiva has a choice as to whether it wants to continue to be a jiva and choose dharma, artha, kama, preyo, purusharthas, or to choose shreyas as the purushartha and understand myself to be nothing but that consciousness by which my journeys of going from body to body will come down. This is the first introductory verse of what is the difference between a Jivatma and Atma, Atma and Jiva difference, or Paramatma and Jivatma difference, and what choice has the Jivatma got? Has the choice of the Jivatma is the traveler, Jivatma is the traveler, Atma is the non traveler. What choices does this traveling Jivatma has? I want to keep on traveling for the rest of millions of years, millions of janmas, that choice is mine. I can choose the prayers as my Purushartha. Or I want to understand my real nature as nothing but that original consciousness and then get free from this traveling. Shreyo Purushartha or Moksha Purushartha, that choice is also ultimately mine. Of course, I've taken a long time because this particular verse requires that kind of an explanation. So we'll see the others in the next two sessions. ॐ नन्दन्तु साधका सर्वे विनश्यन्तु विदूषकाः अवस्थाशाम्भवी मेस्तु प्रसन्नोऽस्तु गुरुः सदा सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः सर्वे सन्तु निरामयाः सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु मा कश्चित् दुःखमाप्नुयात्. ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः.